Tech millionaire CEO overcome with emotion after Maid who saved his life gives him triplets. Hi, my sweet family. I'm so happy you're here with me today. I have a very special story to share, and it might touch your heart. Thank you for being here. We're going on a fun little journey together. But before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? I love reading your comments and seeing where my wonderful family lives all around the world. Now, are you ready? Let's get started. The sun had just started to rise when Caleb Mercer stood still by the big window in his office. His fingers touched the glass, and it felt cold. But inside, Caleb felt something colder, a quiet, empty feeling in his heart. Caleb's office was very high up, 38 floors above the busy city below. Caleb was very successful. He was the boss of a big company called Astor Technologies. His company made computer programs and worked all over the world. If you looked up Caleb Mercer's name, you would see his face on magazines, hear him talk about new ideas, and watch him on TV talks about technology. But none of that showed how Caleb really felt inside. He stood quietly, watching the dark shadows on the tall buildings change as the sun rose. Behind him, 2 phones were blinking, and his watch was buzzing with reminders. But Caleb did not answer. Something strange was happening inside him, a feeling he did not know before. It was like a soft pain, a wanting for something more. Caleb had spent his whole life trying to be in control. Since he was a little boy, he wore nice suits and learned to be a leader. His father, Arthur Mercer, was very powerful and serious. Arthur said, "The business world does not care about feelings. It cares about facts." So Caleb believed that showing feelings was weak, and he kept his feelings locked away, like a secret no one could find. Caleb's mother, Celeste, tried to be kind in her own way. She gave him books, played classical music, and kissed his forehead softly. But she never stayed close for long. Their home was big and beautiful, but it was quiet and cold. They ate dinner alone, and did not spend much time together. Caleb learned to sit straight, speak clearly, and never cry, especially not when his father was around. When Caleb was 16, he was already very smart and good at business. By 28, he was a millionaire. Now at 38, he was the boss of one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the world. He owned parts of companies that worked on computers, artificial intelligence, and clean energy. His work touched many countries. But Caleb could not remember the last time someone asked him, "How are you?" and really wanted to know the answer. His friends were like his work, fast and not lasting. He dated beautiful women who wore fancy dresses and talked carefully. Once, he almost married a woman named Karina. She worked with the media and had kind eyes and a gentle smile. She waited for the real Caleb to show up, but he never did. One rainy night, Karina left him. She stood at his door in a long coat and said, "Loving you is like reading a beautiful book, but the pages are stuck together." Caleb watched her walk away and said, "You're being dramatic." But her words stayed in his heart for a long time. Now Caleb was back in his office, remembering that night. He turned away from the window and walked to his desk. He had a big, black chair made just for him to sit during long workdays. But he did not sit down. Instead, he put his hand on his chest. There was a tight feeling just below his ribs. It had started a little while ago, like a small flutter or tiredness that he could not explain. He thought it was because of jet lag or too much coffee or stress, but now the pain was stronger. He took a deep breath and told himself, "Not now, not today." He had many meetings, papers to sign, and calls to make. Everything was planned very carefully. Later, when Caleb took a shower, the warm water felt sharp and painful on his back. Suddenly, a strong pain hit his chest like lightning. He fell to the floor. For a scary moment, there was only silence. Then he heard footsteps, someone crying, and the sound of a cup breaking on the floor. "Sir, are you okay?" a voice asked. Someone was pressing on his chest. Another voice shouted into a phone, "He's not breathing. Send an ambulance right now." Then everything went dark. When Caleb woke up, he was in a hospital bed. Machines were beeping softly. He had tubes in his arm, and his chest hurt. He tried to speak, but could only make a quiet sound. Then he saw her, Elara. She was sitting beside him, wearing a warm cardigan and holding a magazine. Her eyes got big when she saw him move. "You're awake," she whispered, standing up fast. "Don't move." A nurse came in quickly, happy that he had opened his eyes. Caleb's voice was weak. "You found me." Elara nodded. "You missed your 9 a.m. meeting. I had a bad feeling. I found you on the bathroom floor." Caleb remembered. "You called for help." Elara hesitated, then said, "I did more than that. You weren't breathing. I started CPR. I didn't know what else to do. Caleb slowly turned his head. You saved my life. She looked down, brushing hair from her face. I just did what anyone would do. But Caleb knew better. Most people wouldn't have known what to do. Most would have been scared and waited. But Alara didn't. The doctors said later that without her help, Caleb would not have lived. That night, Caleb lay still, staring at the ceiling. A maid, a woman who quietly folded his clothes and helped him, had touched him and helped him breathe again. Something inside Caleb broke. It was not just his heart. It was the hard shell he had built to keep safe. She had seen him when he was weak and stayed. The next morning, the world looked different. Caleb still wore hospital clothes and looked out the window at the pink morning sky. He felt like he did not know his own life anymore. The heart monitor beeped beside him, reminding him that time kept moving. Outside, the busy world went on. Meetings happened, phones buzzed, and emails piled up. But here, in the quiet hospital room, none of that mattered. There was a soft knock on the door. It opened slowly. There was Alara again. She carried a thermos and a paper bag. Her hair was tied back in a loose braid. She looked calm, not like someone who smiled because she was paid to, but calm and real. You didn't eat dinner last night, she said softly, setting the things on the table. I thought you might want something familiar. Caleb blinked. You're still here? Alara smiled a little. I promised the nurse I would come back this morning. You finally slept through the night. Caleb tried to sit up, but pain pulled at his chest. Alara quickly helped him, putting pillows behind him. She was calm, like she had done this many times before. Take it slow, she whispered. Caleb looked at her hands. They were steady, warm, and not afraid. I'm not used to needing help, he said. I know, she replied, looking into his eyes. But right now, it's okay to need someone. The pain in his chest was not just physical now. Alara poured tea into a paper cup and gave it to him. It smelled like lemon and herbs. It was warm and made him feel safe. Timo, she said with a small smile. My father made this tea when I had a fever. I always thought it tasted like kindness. Caleb stared at the cup. Thank you. It's just tea. But for a man who hadn't talked much except about work for many months, it felt very special. At home, Caleb was allowed to leave the hospital but told to rest, not work, and avoid stress. He did not know what to do with all the free time. His penthouse, once a strong and quiet place, now felt empty. The marble floors echoed his footsteps. The glass walls let in cold light. Everything was shiny, expensive, but very lonely. Every morning, Alara came again. Now she did not come quietly, but with a gentle presence. She moved through the big house like she belonged there. She made soups from fresh ingredients, left notes reminding Caleb to drink water, and changed the bed sheets even when Caleb said it was not needed. One afternoon, Caleb walked into the kitchen and saw Alara quietly singing while stirring a pot of stew. He stopped and listened. The song was old, soft, and sweet. It was like a lullaby from a long time ago. Alara looked up, surprised. I didn't hear you come in. I didn't want to stop you, Caleb said softly. That song is beautiful. Alara smiled. My grandmother sang it to me when I was little. I guess I carry it with me now. Caleb sat down at the kitchen table and watched her. For the first time, he saw her not just as the helper or the woman who saved his life, but as a real person. A person with a family, a past, and a story. And Caleb wanted to know everything. Over the next few weeks, a new kind of comfort grew between them. In the mornings, Alara sat on the edge of his bed with tea and warm food. They talked. At first, they talked about the weather. Then about books, memories, and even dreams. Caleb, who used to think about every word he said, now spoke freely. He told Alara things he never told Karina. Stories from when he was a boy. Quiet fears. Sometimes, he even said that when the city lights blinked outside his window at night, he wondered if anyone would miss him if he disappeared. Alara did not get scared or turn away. She listened carefully. Then she shared her own stories. She talked about Monterey, where she grew up, about her brothers and sisters, and how she worked hard to help them go to school. She told Caleb she was more than just a housekeeper. She had been like a mother to her family after her parents died. She had been very sick 5 years ago and had scars that no one could see. The doctor said I might never have children, she said one night, her voice very soft. I cried for weeks. But then I told myself I could still be a mother in other ways. I didn't stop living. Caleb was quiet. Her bravery touched something deep inside him. You are braver than I have ever been, he said. Alara blinked and smiled. I'm just doing what life asks me to do. That night, Caleb couldn't sleep. He walked through his empty penthouse. He passed the phones and the papers he had not touched. He stopped outside the guest room where Alara was staying during the week. He listened to the quiet inside. For the first time in many years, the quiet wasn't empty. It felt full of hope and new things. Their friendship grew, even though they didn't say much. Alara never asked for Caleb's attention, but he gave it anyway. He found himself waiting to hear her voice in the morning. He made up reasons to sit at the kitchen table while she worked. He stayed near the doorway just to hear her hum a little song. One weekend, he asked if he could drive her to her apartment. They didn't talk much on the way, but the quiet wasn't strange. It was calm and safe. Outside her building, Alara reached for the door handle and said, "Thank you, Mr. Mercer." Caleb looked at her for a long time and said, "You can call me Caleb." She stopped and smiled. "Okay, Caleb." It was the first time in many years Caleb felt like the name really belonged to him. She got out of the car, but before closing the door, she turned back and said, "Take your vitamins and rest." "That's an order." He laughed softly. "Yes, ma'am." That night, Caleb couldn't stop thinking about Alara. One Thursday evening, he invited her to dinner. Not as his worker, but as his special guest. They sat across from each other in the kitchen of his big penthouse. The lights were low, and a single candle flickered between them. Alara wore a simple navy blue dress. Her hair was loose around her shoulders. Caleb had never seen her like this before. She was still humble, still herself, but she was shining with something new, something strong. "Do you ever think about doing something else?" Caleb asked after they finished dessert. Alara tilted her head. "What do you mean? You said you wanted to become a nurse." She nodded and looked a little sad. "I did, but it is expensive, and I couldn't leave my brothers and sisters behind." Caleb looked into her eyes and said, "You still can." Alara frowned. "Caleb, that part of my life is over." "No," he said softly. "It's just beginning." She looked away and blinked her eyes hard. "Let me help," he said gently. "You already saved my life. Let me do something for you." Alara's voice cracked. "You don't owe me anything." "It's not about owing," he replied. "It's about caring." She wiped her eyes. "Why are you doing this?" Caleb took a deep breath. "Because you're the only person who ever looked at me and saw someone worth saving." "Hello, my beautiful family. Are you still there? Are you still watching? Are you still listening? Thank you. I really appreciate you. Please, if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button. Thank you, my lovely family. Now, let's continue. It began in small ways. Caleb started waking up earlier. Not for work calls, but to spend quiet moments in the kitchen while Alara made her morning tea. She didn't say much then, just gave him a nod, a smile, and a warm cup of tea that smelled nice. It was a routine that didn't need words. Sometimes, Alara left little surprises for Caleb. Handwritten notes under the coffee pot, recipes folded next to his tablet, or a quote from a book on a sticky note. One said, "To love and be loved is to feel the sun from both sides." Caleb read those notes like they were special messages. They made him feel warm inside, a warm feeling he didn't know he missed. One Friday, Caleb asked Alara to go with him to an art gallery event. It was fancy, a very grown-up party with important people who gave money to his company. Caleb didn't want to go alone. He wanted her to be there with him, not just for help, but because he felt more like himself when she was close. Alara wasn't sure. "I don't have clothes for that kind of party." "You don't need fancy clothes," Caleb said quickly. "Just come as you are." The next evening, when she came out of the guest room, Caleb's breath caught. She wore a pale ivory dress that shone in the light. It was simple but elegant. She wore small earrings, and her hair was tied softly. She looked calm and beautiful. For the first time, Caleb saw how stunning she really was, not because of the dress, but because she was just being herself. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. Alara's cheeks turned pink. "Thank you, Caleb." The way she said his name, soft and familiar, made his heart beat faster. At the party, she stayed quietly by his side. People nodded politely and looked curious, but no one asked questions. Alara asked smart questions when people talked, smiled kindly, and stood with quiet confidence. People noticed, but Caleb noticed most of all. He wasn't just proud, he was thankful. He was glad to be with someone who saw him for who he really was, not for his money or his job title, but for the person inside. On the way home, the city lights shined through the car windows. Caleb's hand brushed against hers on the center console. She didn't pull away. Back in the penthouse, the air felt heavier. Something was coming, something they both felt. Alara moved to the kitchen to wash the glasses, but Caleb stopped her gently by her wrist. "You don't have to clean anything tonight," he whispered. She turned slowly. "I don't mind." "I do," he said, his voice soft and shaking. "Stay." She looked at him unsure. "Please," he said. She let the sponge fall from her hand, and her fingers shook a little. He took her hand and led her to the living room. Soft light from the terrace made the room calm and warm. They sat side by side, not talking for a while. Finally, Caleb turned to her and said, "There's something I've wanted to say for a long time." Alara looked up, quiet but listening. "I thought I knew what it meant to care about someone. But I didn't. Not really. Not until you." She caught her breath but said nothing. "You changed me," he said. "All the empty parts of my life, you filled them. You didn't ask for anything. You just gave." "I only did what I knew how to do," she said softly. He nodded. "Exactly. And somehow that is everything." He leaned closer. She didn't move away. "I don't want to pretend anymore that I'm only grateful to you," he said. "I'm more than grateful. I think I'm falling in love with you, Alara." The words hung in the air between them. They were delicate and true. Alara blinked quickly and then smiled, her smile shaking with feelings. "You're not alone in that." He touched her cheek gently. Her eyes closed as his thumb brushed under her lashes. Then he kissed her. It wasn't fast or perfect. It was a kiss full of months of feelings, quiet dinners, silent hospital rooms, long looks over soup and papers. It was all the things Caleb was too scared to say before. When they finally stopped, she rested her forehead on his. "Do you really mean it?" she asked. He nodded. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." She smiled. In that moment, they were not boss and worker. They were two people who had been lonely and found a rare friendship that felt like home. After that night, things changed between them but still had respect. Caleb was careful not to scare her. He gave her space. But every day, they found new ways to be together, not as boss and maid, but as two hearts learning to beat together. On weekends, he went grocery shopping with her. He loved how she explained the different foods from her culture. She taught him how to make empanadas. He laughed when he burned the edges. He teased her when she tried too hard to fold the dough just right. At night, they curled up on the couch under her grandmother's blanket. He read books out loud that she borrowed from the library. He stumbled over Spanish words, and she smiled and helped him. Their love wasn't hot or fast. It was slow, gentle, and sure. One evening, after a long walk by the water, Caleb asked, "Do you think this is real?" Alara stopped walking. The wind lifted her hair. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "But it is fragile and special. We have to take care of it." "I will," he promised every day. The next week, Caleb had a private dinner with some close friends and people who invest in his company. It was his first public event since he was sick. He didn't introduce Alara as his worker. He said, "This is someone who means everything to me." There was a quiet moment. Then polite clapping. Some smiled. Some looked surprised. None of that mattered. What mattered was that Alara took his hand under the table and held it tight. Later, after everyone left, Caleb stood barefoot in the kitchen drinking wine. Alara came and wrapped her arms around his waist from behind. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered against his back. "I wanted to," he said. "I'm done hiding who you are to me." She smiled into his shirt. "Then let's not hide from anything anymore." The season changed quietly, and so did Caleb's life. No more long nights filled with work and worries. Now, his evenings were with Alara on the terrace. They talked about things you can't count or measure, childhood stories, lost dreams, and hopes for a future that once seemed impossible. One evening, city lights flickered like tiny stars. They sat wrapped in a blanket, watching the sky turn dark. Caleb said softly, "I used to think I would never slow down, that if I stopped, I'd lose everything I worked for." Alara leaned against him and looked up. "Now," he breathed out, "I feel like I never had anything until I met you." His words were honest. Not fancy. Not to impress. Just true. Alara didn't say anything at first. She reached for his hand and put it on her belly. He looked at her, confused. "I've been thinking," she said carefully. "Do you ever want to have children?" Caleb blinked. He was surprised. He had always thought children were not needed. He thought building a legacy meant earning money and growing his company. But now, with you, the question felt different. "I never thought I'd say this," he said slowly. "But with you, yes, I want that." Alara smiled, but it was a little sad. She stopped for a moment before she spoke again. Her fingers held tight. "Caleb, I need to tell you something." He turned to look at her. "I was very sick a few years ago," she said, looking at the window. After that, my doctor said I might not be able to have a baby. The silence after that felt very loud. Caleb took a moment to think. Then he gently held her face and turned it toward him. Why didn't you tell me before? I was scared, she whispered. I was scared that if we talked about the future, you might change your mind. Caleb's face became soft. Elara, I didn't fall in love with you because you could have a family. I fell in love with you because you are my family. Tears came to her eyes, and she leaned on him. I don't know what will happen, she said quietly, but I wanted you to know. Then let's face the future together, he said. Weeks passed. Autumn came slowly. One morning, Elara sat on the edge of their bed, her hand on her belly. She felt strange for days, tired, dizzy, and uneasy. She thought it was stress or a cold. But inside, she felt something had changed. She found the pregnancy test in the bottom drawer. Caleb had bought it months ago, joking, just in case. They laughed then. Now, she held it with shaking hands. The minutes after were the longest ever. When the test showed the result, she stared at it without moving. Pregnant. The word didn't feel real. She walked around, hand on her mouth, 1,000 thoughts in her head, hope, fear, and disbelief. Could it really be true? That evening, Caleb came home. He found her sitting in the living room with the test in her hand. Elara, he asked, feeling something was wrong. She looked up with wide eyes. Caleb, I'm pregnant. Time seemed to stop. He slowly moved closer, like he was afraid the moment would disappear. Are you sure? She nodded, her voice shaky. I took 2 more tests. All positive. Caleb dropped to his knees. His eyes filled with tears. We're having a baby, he said. She nodded again. He laughed, a mix of disbelief and joy. This is real. Elara was already crying. I don't know how, but yes, it's real. Caleb hugged her tight. You're my miracle, he whispered. You always have been. The next day, they went to the doctor. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of machines. Elara held Caleb's hand tightly. After a few minutes, the doctor raised her eyebrows and turned the screen toward them. I have something to show you, she said softly. Caleb and Elara stared at the screen. There's not just one heartbeat, the doctor said gently. There are 3. Caleb's mouth dropped open. Elara blinked, not believing it. 3, she gasped. The doctor smiled. Triplets. All strong. All growing well. The word hit them like thunder. Triplets? Caleb sat down stunned. He put his hands over his mouth. Elara squeezed his hand tightly. He looked at her, tears running down his face. We're having 3 children. She laughed through her tears. We really are. Caleb said. I need to sit down again. They both laughed, feeling overwhelmed with happiness. From that moment, everything changed. The penthouse was no longer quiet and calm for just 2 people. It became a place to get ready for babies. Books about babies and parenting filled the shelves. Baby clothes arrived in big piles, tiny shirts, soft blankets, and little shoes that Caleb held like they were treasures. They picked colors for the nursery, soft green and warm cream. Elara taught Caleb lullabies in Spanish. He hummed them softly while painting the walls. At night, they talked to the babies, imagining what they might be like. A boy who loved puzzles, a girl who loved music, another boy who always stole cookies. Caleb never hoped like this before. But now, he could not imagine life any other way. Elara's pregnancy was gentle but careful. Caleb became very protective. He was at every doctor's visit, every time she wanted strange foods, and every time she felt tired. When she couldn't sleep, he rubbed her back and whispered kind words in English and Spanish. One night, lying in bed, Caleb put his ear on her belly. I can hear them, he whispered. Elara laughed. You can't, maybe, but I can feel them. He looked up, eyes shining. Do you know what you've given me? She touched his face. The same thing you gave me, hope. When winter came, Caleb called Elara's family in Mexico. He spoke in slow, kind Spanish, telling her brothers and sisters about the babies. Oren and Saren cheered loudly. Their grandmother cried with happiness. Thank you for loving my granddaughter, she said softly. Caleb replied, I don't know how I lived before her. The next week, he set up a virtual baby shower for her family to join from far away. They shared stories, songs, and laughter. It was not fancy, but it was full of love. Even Caleb's workers noticed the change. He started new programs at work, help for parents, time off for dads, help with childcare, and flexible hours. When asked why, he said simply, because families matter more than numbers. One morning, Elara stood in the nursery, hands on her back, looking at the 3 bassinets lined up. She turned to see Caleb watching her from the doorway. He came forward and kissed her softly on the temple. You made this place feel alive, she smiled. You helped. He knelt and put his hand on her belly. Are you scared? A little, she said. Me too, he whispered. But I have never wanted anything more. In that quiet moment, with the city lights shining below and their hearts close, they waited for their miracle. It happened on a sunny morning, the kind of soft, golden light that makes you believe the world is good. Alara had been awake before dawn, moving quietly in bed. The babies, who had been very active lately, were now very still, not quiet but waiting. She sat up slowly and put her hand on her belly. Then came the first sharp pain, then another. She breathed calmly but was alert. Caleb, she whispered. He woke up, still sleepy but alert. When he looked into her eyes, everything changed. It's time, she said, breathing fast. He jumped up, grabbed the packed hospital bag, and called the hospital. Minutes later, they were on the way. Caleb's voice was calm and steady, helping her through every bump and stoplight. You're doing great, he said softly. We're almost there. She squeezed his hand and closed her eyes. I'm scared, she whispered. I am too, he said honestly, kissing her knuckles. But today we will meet them. The delivery room was a blur, soft lights, busy nurses, calm voices. Caleb stood by her side, wearing hospital clothes. His eyes never left hers. He kept touching her forehead and whispering words. Words he did not even know he knew, like, You're not alone. I'm here. You can do this. Alara, tired and focused, never let go of his hand. Hours passed, pain coming and going like waves. When the time came, she pushed with all her strength. Then a cry, a loud, sharp sound that filled the room and cut through the worry like sunlight through fog. Caleb gasped. That's our son, the doctor said, holding up a red, wriggling baby. Caleb's knees almost gave out. Soon another cry. Then another. 3 voices. 3 lives. Alara lay back on the bed, chest heavy, tears flowing. Caleb bent over her, crying too. They're here, he whispered, pressing his forehead to hers. They're really here. In the recovery room, Alara held their daughter. Caleb held the 2 boys. Each baby was wrapped in soft blue and green blankets. Their eyes blinked slowly. Their little fists were curled like tiny stars. Caleb looked at them, amazed. I don't know how to do this, he said softly. Alara looked at him kindly. You're already doing it. He kissed the smallest boy's forehead. I promise, he said quietly. I will never let anything take this away from us. And he meant it. For the first time in his life, Caleb understood love. Not love that was earned by doing well, but love that was a promise. The next days were busy with lullabies, feeding at midnight, and changing diapers. Caleb was more tired than after any long work meeting. But he never complained. He learned how to warm bottles just right, how to rock the cribs gently, and how to hum songs that stopped the babies from crying. When all 3 babies were finally asleep, he would sit by Alara, watching her breathe as she slept. Her hair was messy, her lips a little open, peaceful and tired. This is my real life, he whispered one night, looking at them all. This is everything I didn't know I needed. One afternoon, a month later, Caleb held a press conference at Astor Technologies. Many journalists came. They thought he would talk about a big business deal. But Caleb stood in front of them, wearing a shirt with no tie. He did not use a teleprompter to read. Instead, he spoke from his heart. 3 years ago, I thought being successful meant having big numbers, Caleb said. I thought having control meant having power. I thought feelings made you weak. Then, I almost lost everything. He stopped for a moment. I survived not because of luck, but because someone saved me. She saved my life. Then, she gave me 3 more reasons to keep living. His voice got a little shaky, but he kept going. Today, I want to share a new rule I should have made a long time ago. It is a rule that helps the families of everyone who works here. He told them about new things the company would do. Now people who have babies get 6 months off with pay. There will be special days to rest when feeling sad or stressed. The company will also pay for medicine to help people have babies and care for mothers and babies who need extra help. The people watching clapped very loudly. But what happened next was even more important. When Caleb walked off the stage, he saw Alara waiting behind the curtain. She was holding their baby. Caleb took the baby in his arms and kissed her forehead. You're changing more than this company, Alara said softly. No, Caleb said, you are. I am just following you. Back at home, life was busy. There were diaper changes, burp cloths, and pacifiers all over the place. Their simple, neat apartment had become full of soft pastel colors and toys on the floor. Baby swings made quiet humming sounds in the corners. Caleb loved it. Every time he fed the baby late at night, he thought about how lucky he was. Every little cry was like music to him, a reminder of the precious little lives he was now responsible for. One night, Caleb couldn't sleep. He went into the nursery. The only light came from a small night light. He stood quietly and looked at 3 bassinets. 3 babies were sleeping. He gently fixed a blanket here and tucked in a tiny hand there. Then he sat in the rocking chair, holding his daughter close to his chest. She moved a little, then went back to sleep. Caleb looked out the window at the sleeping city. "I used to think legacy meant tall buildings and lots of money," he whispered. "But it means this. You, your brothers, your mother." He swallowed hard. "You are my legacy." Spring came softly. The first family photo was taken in their garden behind the house. Alara wore a white dress and held their daughter in her arms. Caleb kneeled next to her, with the twin boys resting against his chest. They all looked a little messy but very happy. It wasn't fancy or perfect. It was real. Later that month, a journalist from a family magazine asked Caleb what had changed most in his life. He smiled and said, "Everything. But mostly me." One day, Caleb gave Alara a small box wrapped in shiny silver paper. She raised her eyebrow and said, "What's this?" "Open it." Inside was a gold necklace. 3 tiny charms hung from the chain. Each charm had a letter, M, L, and A. They stood for Oren, Saren, and Lyra, the names they chose for their daughter. Alara blinked through her tears. She was too moved to speak. Caleb took her hand and said, "Every day with you, every moment with our children is a gift. I don't take it for granted." She leaned on him and rested her head on his chest. "I still can't believe we made it here," she said softly. "We didn't just make it," Caleb said. "We made it together." One morning, long after the triplets were asleep and the house was quiet, Caleb stood by the window of his office. But this time it was different. He was not alone. Alara came behind him and wrapped her arms around his waist. Together, they watched the city wake up. He touched her cheek and said softly, "I used to stand here and feel nothing." She looked into his eyes. "And now I feel everything." He kissed her forehead. Down the hall, in the nursery, a soft cry started. Alara smiled and said, "That one's yours." Caleb laughed happily. They held hands and walked toward the sound, ready to face the day together. 5 years later, the once quiet penthouse was full of life. It wasn't silent anymore. It was full of sounds and stories. There were finger paintings on the fridge, juice cups left half full on the counters, and small shoes by the door. These things told a story much richer than money ever could. Caleb Mercer stood in the backyard garden. His sleeves were rolled up, and his shirt was damp with morning dew. Suddenly, a tiny hand pulled on his pant leg. "Daddy," said a little voice. He turned and smiled. His daughter, Lyra, stood holding out her finger proudly. On it sat a tiny red ladybug. "That's very special," Caleb said, crouching down to her level. "Do you know what ladybugs mean?" he asked. She shook her head. "They bring luck." Caleb smiled and said, "And we are already the luckiest people in the world." Nearby, her brothers Kian and Tavian ran around the swing set, laughing and playing. Their laughter sounded like a song that never got old. Caleb watched them with warm eyes. Alara came out of the house with a tray of fresh juice and fruit. She wore a soft yellow sundress, and her curls bounced as she walked. Years had passed, but her smile still made Caleb stop and smile too. "You're supposed to be resting," Caleb said teasingly. "I've been resting," Alara said, setting the tray down. "Now I'm supervising," she added with a smile. Caleb wrapped his arm around her waist. "You're always supervising," he whispered. "And you're always falling in love," she whispered back. "Every single day," he answered. They stood quietly, watching their children play. It wasn't fancy or exciting, but it was theirs. And it was perfect. Later that afternoon, Caleb sat on the living room floor. 2 of his kids were building a wobbly tower with blocks while the third colored quietly nearby. A soft breeze came through the open balcony doors. Suddenly, Alara walked in holding an envelope. "It came," she said simply. Caleb looked up, puzzled. "My graduation results," she said. He blinked, stood quickly, and took the envelope carefully. He read the letter slowly 2 times. Then he looked into her shining eyes. "You did it," he said. She nodded, her voice shaking a little. "I did." Caleb pulled her into a hug. The letter fell to the floor. The triplets cheered, not understanding the big moment, but feeling the joy. You're a nurse now, Caleb whispered into her hair. After everything you made it, he said. I made it because you believed I could, she replied. No, Caleb said. You made it because you never stopped believing in yourself. They held each other for a long time, enjoying the moment. That night, the children were in bed. The laughter had quieted down, and soft lullabies filled the air. The moonlight shone gently across the nursery. Caleb sat in the rocking chair, watching his babies sleep. Alara came in quietly and sat next to him. I was thinking, Caleb began softly, about the first time I saw you. She smiled. When you passed out on the bathroom floor, he joked. She laughed. No, before that. You were checking the pantry and had a pen behind your ear. You were humming to yourself. He smiled. I thought, this woman lives like she is never in a hurry, even when the world is. She rested her head on his shoulder. I was nervous that day, she said. It was my first month working for you. You didn't show it, Caleb whispered. But I noticed everything. He paused and then asked, do you think we were meant to end up here? Alara looked at their children sleeping peacefully. I think we were meant to find each other, she said softly. And then we chose to build something beautiful. The next weekend, Caleb had a small garden party. It wasn't for business people or shareholders. It was for friends, neighbors, other parents, and the families Alara had met in nursing school. It was a party to celebrate not money but milestones, years they had lived and love they had grown. Caleb stood under the garden arbor, holding Lyra on his hip. He raised his glass and said to the small group, I used to think life was something to conquer. That love was not important. That success meant being alone at the top. He paused and held his daughter close. But then I learned that love is not a distraction from our goals. Love gives those goals meaning. Sometimes, the people who save your life don't wear capes. Sometimes they carry laundry baskets and make lemon tea. The crowd laughed softly. Caleb looked at Alara, who was near the dessert table, cheeks rosy. This family saved me, he said, his voice full of feeling. Every day they remind me the most important empire I will ever build is right here, inside these walls. He lowered his glass and kissed his daughter's temple. The applause was quiet, but full of love. That evening, as the sun set, Caleb sat alone on the patio. Alara came and sat with him, placing 2 cups of tea on the table. Ted Limo, she said with a smile. Caleb smiled back. You remembered. I never forget what matters, she said. He looked at the darkening sky. I don't know what I did to deserve this life. You let yourself be seen, she said simply. And you stopped running. He turned to her. You're everything, he whispered. She took his hand. So are you. As night came, and their children slept, Caleb and Alara sat quietly, sipping tea and watching the stars come out one by one. There was no loud music or big cheers. Just 2 people who had rebuilt their lives from sadness. They chose every day to stay together. And in that choice, they found everything they once thought was impossible: love, healing, and a future full of hope. Love can change even the coldest stories. What started as a hard time became a lifetime of meaning. A man who thought he needed no one, and a woman who gave everything without asking for anything. Now, I want to ask you, have you ever been surprised by love, from a place you did not expect? Do you believe people can change, not just for someone else, but because of themselves? If this story touched your heart, please press that like button. It helps more people find these stories. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss a new story. Most importantly, share your thoughts in the comments. What you say might help someone who is going through a hard time right now. Until next time, this is Sage King, reminding you, the most beautiful stories are the ones where broken hearts find their way back together. I love you all. Take care of your hearts.